Oh, good evening and welcome to Be More Super Live. It is Thursday, the 1st of August. Dan, how are you, my friend?
I think you missed out the most important thing, that it's International Yorkshire Day, or National Yorkshire Day. I don't think it's very international, but it's National Yorkshire Day, so shout out to my Yorkshire fam. Never said that before in my life.
Yorkshire Day, my word. Are they running out of days to choose and they've just thought, do you know what, let's give them to the Yorkshires?
Yep, it's all about Henderson's relish, Seabuck's crisps, and, whinging about things.
Well, you know what, Dan? I'm so excited. Literally, I'm giddy right now because this guest that we've got on the show live, I've been trying to get for the last year and a half, even longer. I've been a fan of his since Robin Hood days, and we're going to have a few questions about that because it relates to us quite heavily. But let's get this guest on. He starred in Vikings, Taken the series, and of course Robin Hood, but he's in a new movie called Clear Cut, which we've had the pleasure from Liongate to watch a little while ago, and it's epic on so many levels. So please welcome the wonderfuls, Clive Standen. Clive, welcome to the show, sir.
Hey man, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Oh, do you know what? It's an absolute pleasure. And before we get into the nitty gritty of your career and especially Clear Cut, I've been doing a bit of research on you, Clive, and I was shocked and excited to find out that you technically started your career in my neck of the woods, and those woods being Sherwood Forest. So I live literally 10 minutes from Sherwood Forest. So I'm currently right next to Mansfield, which is right next to Sherwood Forest. But you started your career technically in those woods.
I did. I mean, when most kids are getting their first job working in a supermarket or kind of like working in a garden centre or wherever it is, I didn't have that kind of usual path. I decided I was going to get a job with a stunt team at Sherwood Forest, jousting, sword fighting, climbing trees, abseiling out of them. It was fantastic. I was really lucky. I remember it's around 1990. 1990, it was when Robin Hood Prince of Thieves came out at the cinemas, 1994 or something like that. Sherwood Forest obviously had this big boom of tourists because they were like, obviously everyone was watching the Kevin Costner film, and they decided to do a reenacting kind of live Tales of Robin Hood kind of a show. So they hired this stunt team to put together a show, and I saw an advert kind of looking for someone to play Wolf Little John's son. I was like 13, 14 years old. And I used to finish school on a Friday. I'd go up to Sherwood Forest. We'd camp in Sherwood Forest, which is cool anyway, because no one's really allowed to do that. Camp in Sherwood Forest, wake up at 5 in the morning, kind of put on all this armor and things. And then we'd start doing this live show on the Saturday for all the tourists. But it was like an interactive thing where you'd walk through the forest with Hearn the hunter, and he would tell you, Robin, the highwaymen are out here, and Robin patrols these lands. The sheriff has ruined it all, and then suddenly I would abseil out of a tree, come down, and go, the sheriff's men are coming, the sheriff's men are coming. And then all the sheriff's men and Guy Gibbs would gallop by all the tourists and like grab me, throw me on the back of the horse. Then I'd be taken to where the major oak is. Robin would come to the rescue with all these tourists, going, we're going to go and save this boy. They'd have a showdown. He'd fire his bow and arrow. They'd have jousting. So it was crazy. I mean, I was 14 years old getting strapped onto the back of a horse because people are always like, well, could you horse ride at 14? I was like, not really. They would put me on back of a horse, they would put a lance in my hand, hold me tell me to hang on for dear life and slap the back of the horse. And I'd be like galloping into battle, kind of charging and jousting with people. But it was a lot of fun.
So that sounds like the best job ever, doesn't it? I imagine, to
It
be fair,
was.
that's before they built that big Tesco in Ollerton, so I can understand how you needed to branch out where you needed to be. You know what I mean? I get it.
It was great. It was like, I felt like a bit of a traveling gypsy as well, because all the guys that did it, they weren't like professional stuntmen. It's not like now when I'm in the movies and I've got these guys that are all trained in martial arts. And these guys used to just put on metal armor they'd welded and made themselves and just smack the living daylights out of each other with real metal swords.
The 90s. You can't beat it, can you? You can't beat 90s health and safety, can you?
Yeah, health and safety was not a thing. It was just get hit and just hope for the best, which I think there's still some medieval reenactment societies out there that still follow those same health and safety rules. But it's funny you say that because I used to know Tony. I think his name was Tony, and he was the sheriff from Nottingham. that was the official sheriff from Nottingham, and then the Robin Hood back then. I want to say his name begins with a J. He used to date one of my friends, Loretta. But yeah, back then it was amazing, and I'm sure I've probably seen you in Sherwood Forest around that time, which is bizarre. So how does one go from that, from Sherwood Forest to now Hollywood, which literally you are a prime example that if anyone needs to find someone to aspire to be, I mean, to come from, I mean, you've described it coming from a working background. Your dad was a
Yeah.
welder. To where you are now. It's an incredible journey. So what made you go into acting? What was that eureka moment that thought, do you know what? This is for me.
Well, there's the funny answer, and then there's the really honestly truthful answer, and they're both justified. And the funny answer was at the time when I was a kid, I was Muay Thai boxing. I was doing things like this, stunt fighting and things. And there was a girl at school I liked, and she did drama. And it was that age when you get to elect a special subject. You got maths, English, and stuff, but you can choose like woodwork. You can do drama. You can do dance. You can do whatever. And she was like, "Do drama," and I'm like, "Well, she does it. And you don't have to do any homework. It's going to be a laugh." So that was the initial reason for starting drama. I didn't take it very seriously at all. But the most honest answer is, once I did that, I didn't get the girl. I ended up with a career. But I had a teacher. I had a teacher who was wonderful, and she was like, "Look, I can see you sitting at the back of the class, acting like Bart Simpson, not taking it seriously, but you're actually really good. And if you applied yourself to this, you are so much better already than a lot of the kids who really want to do it, go to stage coach and all these kind of like after school clubs and that. And you're not even taking it seriously, and you've got something. So I'm just telling you, you've got a choice now if you want to take this seriously or you want to just goof off at the back and try and pull the girl." And I just, for some reason, something clicked in me, and sometimes when it's not the parent that sees the star in the child, it's the teacher. And I suddenly just thought, I've got someone who's got my back here, who's kind of like, championing me. And with me, that I've always been like tunnel vision. Once I kind of get, that kind of little bit of a push through the door, and I did, and I just started taking it seriously, and I got into the National Youth Theatre, the National Youth Music Theatre. I did my first play when I was 18 in Shakespeare's Globe with Eddie Redmayne.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it kind of went from goofing around. I didn't, I think before I started doing it, all I'd ever done was play like the guy that gave the cow to Jack in Jack and the Beanstalk in some, primary school play. I didn't do any, theatre groups and things like that. I wasn't really that inclined. But yeah, I just suddenly got in at the National Youth Theatre, and I was in London for 2 months every summer holidays doing, what amounted to kind of professional plays in the West End, and then got into drama school and took it from there.
That is
But yeah, if
awesome.
you'd asked me when I was a kid if I could have been on TV, I would have laughed at you. I thought theatre was achievable because
Yeah.
then I did see that, but the idea of being on a film that you'd see Tom Cruise on the TV or whatever, and you're like, that's movie star land. That's not. And even the idea of being on anything more than maybe a bit part on the bill. That was kind of where I thought most actors could aspire to get to. So where I am now is completely alien to my 14-year-old son.
That's really ironic because I did do a bit part on the bill. So that was like the high end of my career. Like, and then now I'm here. I genuinely love that because there is a part. I mean, the part of the UK that we're from. I'm from South Yorkshire, so I lived and worked in. I think it's North Notts. I think you guys refer to it as, isn't it? Like that part of the world. It's so working class, and it's so. You've got to have a trade. You've got to have a trade under your belt, so before you can go out, you've got, you know what I mean. You've got to have something to fall back on because they and it's speeches like that kind of give you the fear somewhat. Did you ever get that fear? Because like both Brian and I have done some low level stuff, and I think there's a point where you get to about 25 to about 28 where you go, Christ, I should have got a trade. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's the kind of double-edged sword as well, because there is that thing about in this industry anyway, once you have a fallback, you fail. Like I remember going to drama school, and there were the university students. We had the 3-year course, and then we had the 2-year course. And the 2-year course was for people that had already gone to university and they just wanted to do two years in acting. So what they'd done is they'd gone to university and studied whatever, psychology, English, whatever. It could be, engineering, whatever. And they suddenly went, well, I just want to do acting, get it out of my system. But already those actors, by the time I was in my mid-20s, had given it up, and they weren't unsuccessful. They had their fallout plan. They were like, right, I was trained as a psychologist. I'm going to do that because acting's not making me any money. And I think the thing is with me is I have no fallback plan. It was like, if you don't make it, you're not good at anything else. You don't have any other qualifications, so it kind of forces you just to stay in the game another day. And as we can probably gather, and most people know, is that your whole career as an actor can change in a day. You can go from being in a theatre job earning pittance to suddenly being in a big movie. It's all it takes is that one audition. That's what do they say? It's luck and circumstance coming together at the same time. Yeah.
But a quick question is that, do you remember the girl's name at school?
Yeah, her name was Laura.
Come on. Come on,
Laura.
I tell you what, you missed out. There's like a point in that she probably paid you a compliment this one time about a shirt that you had on. And it's a meme now about how blokes kind of attach themselves to that one compliment that, like, for example, you're wearing a hat now, Clive, right? And, if somebody said to you in 1996, hey, you look really good in a hat, I would wear a hat every single day of my life for the next 50 years at least. You know what I mean? And that's kind of how it works, isn't it?
The irony is, as well, I remember when I liked her, she always went for the older guys, and all the older guys she went with were the actors that were on the university course, and the De Montfort University course. So she was going out with like these 18, 19, 21-year-old guys. And that's the irony I hold on to now, is like she was obviously like, oh, they're the actors, they're the real actors. And then somehow this little boy that was chasing her around.
Just some guy.
Talking about training, we've had so many great actors like yourself on this show. And what astonishes me is how they get into the industry and how they're trained. And obviously in the UK, it's slightly different how we train our actors opposed to, say, in the States. Do you think it gives us an advantage? Because it is at times like an invasion of the English all over again in Hollywood.
That's a really good question. I was actually just talking about this the other day because I now live in Los Angeles, and I have lots of actor friends who have acting coaches, and they just have this one coach who teaches them everything, and that to me is really bizarre, because in England we go to drama school and we have. I mean, when I went to LAMDA, the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art, I had something like 25 different teachers over the 3 years who all teach you different disciplines, and then you have guest speakers like Brian Cox from Succession. He was a patron of LAMDA, and he'd come in for like a month and teach what he'd done. And what we were always told is just like, make a toolbox. Some of this stuff that these teachers would come in and teach you would work for you, but wouldn't work for another actor. So it's like trying to put a square peg in a circle hole, and you're like, I can't do this. And it doesn't make you a bad actor. It's just that's not for you. You need to find your own technique. So if you only have one acting coach and it gels, I'm sure, Brad Pitt's acting coach, when he met her, they just gelled and it just worked, and she helped him become a great actor. But that same acting coach could work with me and get nothing out of me. Yeah. It's all dependent on the teacher. And I think that's the main difference, is that we have the British actors, we have a toolbox. We have lots of things we can rely on, and the American actors are stuck with that kind of approach, which is either works or it doesn't. Because I don't think it's that easy to find one teacher that just suddenly sees things the way you do. It's such a bizarre profession.
Because it's bizarre, because a lot of the American actors often do like degrees at university on completely different subjects compared to acting. So I suppose that's their sort of backup just in case. But how do you find the industry compared to the UK? Because we see Hollywood as this shining land where dreams are made of, and the streets are paved with gold. But how is it compared to, say, when you've worked in the UK, on how they treat actors and the whole industry as a whole?
It's an interesting one. It's always to do with budgets as well. Like, obviously the world of streaming and everything now, there's so much more TV out there. And, I'm not talking about the HBO dramas, which are incredible, and, they put so much money into the scripts and the production values. But there is a difference between, I just wish sometimes that there was a happy middle where you get like a brilliant BBC drama, 6-part drama, and it's the most incredible script. It can be like Luther. Remember Luther when it came out with Idris Elba?
Yeah,
something like that. It's just so well written, and you're invested in it, and it's just on the BBC or ITV. And in America, they have these massive shows. But what I realize is that the money is behind those shows, but the quality is not always there. It's I mean, I worked with a showrunner once who described it's trying to keep the pies from falling off the conveyor belt, and I'm like, that's what we're making out here. We're making pies. We'll just go over time. We'll just keep the machine churning. Whereas there's more time in a 6-part BBC drama to actually just make it incredible, and the writing team right. And when I did Vikings, Michael Hurst was our sole writer on Vikings. So even though it was an American show, it was funded by American money. The creatives were Irish and British, and I think it shows. You get one writer investing in the story, as opposed to another TV show that I might have worked on in America, where you have a room of writers, but they don't really care as much in the same way. So the quality is all cliched, and they just, as long as it's getting churned out every week, and the big studio is making money, and that's. I just wish there was a happy medium where you could get the quality behind of the pre-production of actually making a quality product, and then
I feel that there's
a.
I feel that there's like a mixture. Like I've seen a lot of these, collaborations between one of the big American studios and somebody like the BBC, because I feel that in terms of the writing and especially grittiness, like we do grittiness really well in the UK. Like, you know what I mean? We do it so very well. And because of when America is good, it's outstanding. You know what I mean? Like it's breathtaking. And I feel like people who live in and around that world don't really understand. They've never been poor. They don't really understand what it's like to live in that kind of top end of the working class kind of middle ground. I know that sounds odd, but do you feel like that because that the British writers have come on board on projects such as this, do you feel like it adds that grittiness and that realness to it a little bit?
Yeah, I think what you just said is quite true. I mean, it does, and there definitely is more of an interest in going to the gritty and to going to the real raw emotions of the human condition, I suppose, for want of a better phrase. Whereas there is more in tendency for certain American TV shows to just be glossy, to not really go to the truth. More of that escapism. Like I used to get annoyed on Taken, where we would have scenes where, for instance, I would be breaking into a high-tech facility on my own, and I would be like kind of breaking and hacking into the computer, and then they would go up to me and go, well, we need to add this line in here. And I'm like, what? So I'm like, I'm just hacking into the mainframe computer. And you're like, who am I talking to? Why would I say that out loud? And they're like, well, because some people, and this is what they said, some people will be like doing the ironing while they're watching the TV, or they'll be on Twitter while they're watching the TV. So they're not really watching you. So you need to almost tell them what's going on, or they'll get lost in the plot. And you're like, I don't really want to be making TV for those people. I want people to be engaged and struggle to keep up with me. I want to be one step ahead of the audience, and they're constantly asking questions. And I feel like that's what a lot of those gritty dramas and things are, what I aspire to be in. But there is a need, I think, for that escapism where it's just a bit of fluff that people put on, when they put the kids to bed. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's just not necessarily something I aspire to be in.
I mean, this is why as well that I love independent movies, because I find with independent movies you get a bit more heart and soul. I think it's more focused on story. But before we talk about Clear Cut, you have starred on screen with so many great names. Literally, we could spend all day listing them. But is there like one star that comes to mind that really blew you away, that you took something away from that experience? I mean, to name one.
It's a good question. Like I said, there's 100 stories going on in my head, but the first one that I kind of just grabbed out of the air would be, because she made a lasting impression on me, was Ava Green. When I did Camelot, I worked with Ava Green, and she seemed really aloof when I first met her, because she was coming straight off of Casino Royale, and she was a big star, and it's very easy. As she taught me, it's very easy to judge someone, and actually, sometimes nerves and insecurity can come across as arrogance, and it wasn't, because I remember we literally knew each other for about 2 episodes, and I missed the introduction because I was a bit starstruck. And then she was like, we were working with each other. We even had scenes together, and we hadn't really said hello. And I remember on episode 2 or something, she came over to me and she kind of kissed her fingers, kissed my forehead. She went, "You're Clive, aren't you? I'm so sorry. Why didn't we meet properly? You know, do you want to come out for a drink tonight?" And then I learned that she's actually super shy, and she's got so much going on her plate that she hasn't got time. And she's one of the most wonderful human beings I've worked with, and really down to earth actress. Um, and it was really weird that I could have gone away going, "She's an arrogant cow," and she wasn't. You know, it's like first impressions. You suddenly think of someone. So that was the first one that came to her head. She was.
Did you ever get
I
to
still
tell
hold
her?
her.
Did you ever go for that drink and go, "Do you know what? I thought you were a right stuck-up cowbag when I first met you." Did you ever manage to to mention that to her?
No, I didn't. But I did sit around a load of actors in the show, and they were all talking about how they thought she was. And I was like, actually, she's not. You know, and also she's got so much on her plate. She really doesn't. And we're in Dublin. She really doesn't want to go for like 6 Guinnesses with a load of 21-year-old boys who are all kind of playing
Boom.
knights in China Arm. You know what I mean? She's got
Oh,
better things to do. So when you're like, "Hey, do you want to come out for a drink tonight?" She's like, "No, actually." She's probably is sitting and learning the lines. She's got a lot to do, doing some photo shoot in France at the meantime while doing press for James Bond. You know, there's all that stuff going on in someone's head that you just take for granted that you don't see. Yeah.
oh, that's an awesome story. But let's talk about Clear Cut, because Lionsgate kindly gave us a screener to watch. And it's such an awesome film, and you're surrounded by an awesome cast. And we're going to talk in depth about this film because I've got so many questions. In a nutshell, can you describe whom you play and a bit about the movie?
Well, I play a character called Jack, and the film starts, and he is signing up to be a logger. Yeah, Alec Baldwin's character describes him as a greenhorn. He doesn't really know what he's doing. It's like, what's a man at this age deciding to suddenly go out into the wilderness and train to be a logger? And obviously, it's an action film. He comes across a meth camp, drug meth runners in the middle of the forest, and steals their money that they leave in a bag, and then suddenly it ends up in this big hunt through the forest and against the forces of nature. I'm wading through rivers and climbing mountains and getting beaten to a pulp and getting back up and getting beaten again. But there is
You
a
got your
twist
ass
because
kicked
Jack.
so many times, Clive. You
I
get your ass
do.
kicked a handful of times, an exorbitant amount of times in this movie.
Yeah, but Jack is not exactly what he says he is, and that's the twist of the movie. That there's more going
It
on.
definitely is, and it's very hard to describe this movie without spoiling anything. So that was an excellent description. What attracted you to the role of Jack? Because as Dan just said, Jack doesn't have an easy time in this film. So what attracted you to the role?
Well, I was attracted to it originally because I read it and I just thought, this guy's just a real guy. You know, when he gets hit, he gets bruised and he bleeds. When he falls over, he gets back up and limps. And there's nothing in it that's too over the top. And I was like, I can do most of this because I do like doing a lot of my own stunts within reason. And I was like, I can make this guy real. Because he really does get beaten to a pulp and get back up and just keeps taking punishment. But I do love someone who's got fire in their belly. You know, like when I was in Taken, and the same with Liam Neeson, who played the same role, is that it's very easy as an actor to justify someone whose daughter has been taken, and if you don't get back up when the bad guys are beating down on you, no one's going to save her. So that's what keeps you going. It's what keeps you getting back up. And Jack's very similar. He's a guy that just has an axe to grind, with a pardon the pun, and you got to put a bullet in his head to stop him. And I do love characters like that. It's like, what will a human being go to avenge something or to get revenge or whatever it may be? It's the motivation for them to just keep going. Like a unstoppable force.
And that's what I love about this movie, because Jack, the character takes the audience with him, because it's one thing having like an action hero that's kicking ass and taking names, but the fact that Jack is taking the hits and you feel for him, but yet he's going forwards. It's a bit like the Rocky story. It's not how many, it's not how hard you can get hit. It's not how hard you can hit. It's how hard you can get hit and keep moving forwards. And you've got a picture there, and it does look like you don't have a great time on that movie, but it's absolutely fantastic. And there's so many twists. You did all your own stunts. I mean,
I
why?
did.
Why on earth
I
did you
don't
do
know
all your
why.
own stunts? Because surely if you get injured, shooting stops and there won't be a happy director.
Well, do you know what? I got there and they didn't have a stunt double for me. They didn't have someone that could do it anyway. So I was like, I guess I'm going to have to do this all myself.
I was busy that
Um,
week. Sorry, Clive. My apologies. I had a lot going on. I was moving house.
It was one of those things as well. I remember when I finished the job, I treated myself to a chiropractor. I was like, I think I need this because obviously
Oh,
I'd
yeah.
done all that, and then I remember I got off the plane and I just felt so tight, and I was like, I'm going to go to my chiropractor, and he just took one little adjustment, and he was like, "What have you been doing to yourself?" He literally looked at me. He was like, "Your spine is contorted and contracted." And it was like, it was ridiculous. And it reminded me actually of a story. I was in Monte Carlo once at one of these weird film festivals, like one of those ones where it's like the opening of an envelope where they invite all these actors around in Monaco and no one really knows why they're there. And you're standing around a swimming pool holding a glass of champagne and you're like, why did I get invited to one of these things? And then suddenly this elbow just comes right into my ribs and it's Lee Majors. I turn around, it's
Oh
really Lee
no.
Majors. And he turns around and he goes, hey, you're the Viking, right? The Viking. And I went, yeah. And he goes, I've never seen it. But they say you do your own stunts. And I said, yeah, I try to. And he goes, yeah, so did I. And he walked away pretending he had like arthritic fingers. And he was like,
Well, he's a $64 million man. Like, of course, he can
I
do his own
know.
stunts. Yeah, science had made him significantly better than us mere mortal men.
That is very true.
Now,
That is very true.
now, you mentioned earlier, Clive, and I'm really glad you mentioned it because it was something that I definitely picked up from this movie. You don't say a whole lot in this movie because the entire point of it is so real. You don't have what you mentioned earlier, that narrative piece where you are sat, I'm just hacking into the mainframe. You didn't have to do any of that. It is just as it is. And I got sucked in by that because I wasn't getting this constant juxtaposition, this constant reassurance of what's happening, and oh my God, I've got to walk up that hill, and God, I've been stabbed and shot, and there's those
Not
geezers
again.
again. It didn't have any of that, which I genuinely picked up on. That must have been refreshing for you as an actor, just to get on with the story a little bit, right?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, we used to do that in Vikings as well. We'd like get all this dialogue and be like, you don't need to speak. Let the audience ask the questions. Just get rid of this bit of dialogue and just have the audience read into the person and go, what's he thinking? What's going on? It's good to get the audience to ask questions, I think, rather than answer them all the time for. Yeah.
And then you star alongside some great actors. Stephen Dorff, one of my favorite actors of all time. The Power of One is one of my favorite movies when I was a kid that he was in. Tom Welling, Superman, a massive Smallville fan. And then Alec Baldwin, as well as Lucy Martin at the beginning, as well as other amazing actors. What was that like? Is there any moments that you can share, between shots of working with these other great actors?
Yeah, I mean, all of them I've got stories of that were all memorable and fun. I'm like, Stephen is really intense. We had that fight scene. We have a fight scene going on at the end of the movie, which we both did. Uh, he's it's funny. He's a small guy, but he has that kind of like presence, that gravitas that just makes him so much more larger. Because I'm 6'3", and I remember when I met Stephen, I was like, he's a lot smaller. He's like a classic thing. As a movie star, he's a lot smaller in real life. But you don't realize when you're acting with him because he builds himself up. He's good. Alec was actually a gentleman from everything he was going through at the time because this came after Rust. Um, he was very open and really genuinely giving as an actor, and I know how hard that must have been for him to be going through whatever he was going through behind the scenes. But yeah, absolutely, it was an absolute charming man to kind of do a scene with in between takes and things, full of stories. And I had my dog on set a lot of time, and Alec had just been through a hip operation as well, and I could tell that he was a bit like, oh, terrified of this dog jumping up on him. But he was great. We'd be traveling in the car together because he was just like, I just want a bit of company. Because you know what it's like sometimes when you're the big actor that comes in for a couple of days. And everyone's afraid to talk to you, so therefore you just eat on your own. You do that. So he was like, "Come in the car with me. Come on, get in." And the dog would pile in, and he'd be like, "Oh my God, it's not gonna jump on me." And he was great. But Tom Welling, I have a really funny story with Tom, because Tom is actually Superman through and through. I promised him I'd tell this story because it's true, and I think he deserves to get the acknowledgement for it. But we had a fight scene in Clear Cut where Tom pulls me out of the car. The car is on. I've just smashed it into a tree, lost control of the car, and he pulls me out of the car, and we have this fight scene that goes right down on the floor. But we did a take, as I hit the car into the tree, as he pulled me out of the car, my leg hit the gear stick and it went into reverse. So as I got pulled out of the car, my legs were under the front wheels of the car, and the front wheels started going backwards. And I wasn't aware of it. I felt something click, but I wasn't aware the car was moving because we were throwing each other around the ground. And he saw it, and my leg was right under the wheel. And Tom Welling grabbed me by the scruff of the neck, and he pulled me out of the way of a moving car. So without Superman,
You literally got rescued by Superman.
That is
I
awesome.
got rescued by Superman. Yeah, and then
You're like right up there with Lois Lane.
The director was filming through the other window of the car. He leapt into the car, turned, just grabbed the gear stick and slammed it into neutral. But 2 more seconds later, and I could have been roadkill.
Wow, you would have been toast.
Wow.
The great thing about this film, it makes you think afterwards. Think where the story could continue, because you don't really get any sort of. I don't want to ruin it for people. They need to watch it because they'll know what I'm talking about. But I've been thinking for the past couple of days about what could happen next after this film. Do you think there's any continuation, or do you think that's it? Will we see Jack again?
I don't know. I like the idea, though. I like the idea because it is left. Well, you don't know, but I mean, after what he goes through, it's so tough, isn't it? I don't want to give anything away.
It is.
Whether he survives or not, then he will be one dark punisher of a human being for a second movie. But, yeah.
I mean, do you feel that you deserve to have a role where you just put your feet up now and you don't get punched? Because Vendetta, for instance, which I think is an absolutely kick-ass film on so many levels. It's absolutely wonderful. Again, a brilliant cast. Who can say that they've acted alongside Mike Tyson, as well as Bruce Willis and Theo Rossi and Thomas Jane. Do you think that you'll ever get a time when you can put your feet up and relax?
I keep ringing my agent. I'm like, Queen's Gambit 2. I want to be in. I want to just play chess.
All the beer, let's do a bit of cooking. Yeah. But the one thing I noticed in Vendetta, the woman that plays your wife, Lauren, I've actually had on the show. And she is such a ray of sunshine. She really is such a lovely lady on so many levels. Clive, don't go anywhere. We're just going to go for 20 seconds to do the sponsor's message, because I'm looking at the time. I'm thinking, I'm going to get in trouble. I won't be a second.
Clive, keep an eye out for the code, Clive. It's the best thing about the show. Keep an eye out for the code. When Brian reads the code, listen to it. It's an absolute treat.
So here we go. So this is a sponsor's message. I'm going to do this as quick as I can. So our sponsors are Prop Store, which are your number one place to get anything screen used, worn, costume, props from your favorite film or TV program, including Vikings. They've got stuff from Vikings. Actually, I don't know if they've got stuff that Clive's worn. Who knows? Check them out on propstore.com. I've got a little runner just here.
What's the code, Brian? Show us the code, Brian. What's the code?
Well, the code, Dan, if you want to get 10% off, 10%,
Brian.
Off
10% off from Brian.
All you've got to do is put in this code, which is Brian10.
Come on!
Simple code. Brian10. Brian with a Y, not an I.
Tell him
and
Brian
10
sent you.
For 10%. Tell him Brian sent you. It's not a garage, mate. It's not Hardwick Motors. Do you know what I mean?
It's like going to the shop with a note from your mum to buy some fags. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Hey, I've come here to get 10% off. Brian said, well, what's the code? You can't forget it. You can't forget that code.
Brian10. So check them out, because Tuesday Tuesday, we've got them live on the show talking about their latest auction. And literally, they have got screen use props from everything from Batman to Jurassic Park, you name it. Some big ticket items on that. So check it out. 10% off, Brian 10. I'll take this off and we'll go back to our wonderful guest, Clive. There we go. I do apologize about Dan. He gets slightly excited about that
Favorite
code.
bit.
I've got to
Favorite
say.
bit.
But do you know what? It would be extremely rude if we didn't briefly talk about Vikings, because I know we've got a lot of Vikings fans out there, and you played a brother, a warrior, a duke, and a legend. That is Rollo, which I've got some pictures here, which is an epic. Look at that. How can that? Please say you've got that as a life-size standee in your place in LA.
That's the one thing that they never made. They never made the old action figures. We got the fun ones, but I saw the Game of Thrones boys. They all got kind of live action figure kind of things done in the Forbidden Planet and that. But no, they never did the Vikings guys.
Oh, what? That is that. See, if there's anyone out there that does custom figures, I think we need one of Clive, and we can send it on to you, which be a great piece to your collection. But your story arc in this show is absolutely epic. I think it's one of the best things I've ever seen on TV, from start to finish. I mean, what is your greatest memory from working on that show? And I suppose that's going to be very, very hard because it covers a long time. I mean, you started, I think, 8 years ago. So, what's been the greatest memory from working on that show?
Yeah. Well, the greatest memory really is what you just said. I mean, the ability to be able to play a character from the age of 30 to late 60s, because that never happens. When you start jumping through time in TV shows, what the producers usually do is they have a young version of the character and then they cast an older actor to take over the reins as he gets older. But they let all of the actors play our characters from start to finish. And that for me is the great memory, to be able to play this crazy 30-year-old barbarian, nutcase berserker, and go through all those transitions to right up to old man Rollo, Duke of Normandy with his gout and his kind of, and you just don't get to do that. The physical transformation to go from season to season and go, I'm going to make this guy hit his peak and then have him fade away. That's I don't think I've really ever seen that on any other TV show, and that's thanks to an amazing makeup team and then also the writer and the producer having faith in the actors to be able to pull it off.
Do you think we'll
But yeah,
see
there's
him
too
again?
many memories.
Do you think we'll see him
I hope
again on our
so.
screens?
I was actually just talking about trying to pitch to Netflix or whoever owns the rights to Vikings now a little spin-off, because the Valhalla one, the one that's on TV, is not a spin-off of Vikings. I mean, it's made by the same team or whatever, but it's set 100 years later. It's got a spin-off has to have at least one of the original characters from the TV show in it. Otherwise, it can't really be a sister show, it's just another show about Vikings made by the same people. You've got to have something that the audience can grasp onto as the anchor. So my pitch would be Vikings: The Norman Conquests, and you start it in that time frame where Rollo went to Normandy and left Kattegat to go and join Gisela. And the reason why I would start it there is because that timeline allows Ragnar to still be alive, because there was 15 years between when Rollo left and Ragnar disappeared at the top of the hill, and his sons grew up, and he comes down the hill and has that famous scene where he goes, "Who wants to be king?" But no one knows what happened to him in those 15 years. So there's nothing to say that he didn't go over to Normandy and confront his brother Rollo. So we have all those. We have guest stars from the original cast. And then Rollo very quickly, in my pitch, Rollo would very quickly die, maybe only be around season 1, because it has to be about William the Conqueror, who is Rollo's great-great-grandson, who obviously is the man in history who's responsible for most of the things that happen in Europe. But the royal family of Great Britain probably wouldn't be around without William the Conqueror. I mean, the whole 3 lions on your shirt comes from the fact that Normandy had 2 lions, and when William the Conqueror conquered Britain, he made the 3rd lion on his crest. So that's why we have 3 lions on our shirt. It's a period of history that's never been done, and it starts with Vikings.
And we need to learn his history, because I had Jesse V. Johnson on the show a little while back, and you was in Boudica, and which he's a great director. And what I wanted to ask was, I put out a film review of Boudica because I loved that film, I really did. And there are people out there that are quick to critique the accuracy of these shows. And I know that you're a history buff, and what you've just said just then proves it. I mean, did you face anything like that when you was in Vikings, where people would, I don't know, tweet you or send you a message going, "This ain't right," because he wouldn't wear the fur on his right arm, and you know,
I think
Yeah.
you'll find.
yeah, exactly.
All the time. I mean, the funny story. I remember we were at San Diego Comic Con, which is the big one, the big halls, and when you kind of showcase the
It's on right
shows.
now.
And they ask questions for the audience at the end of your panel, and this guy came forward dressed as Floki, and kind of came up to the front. And he went, "This question is for Gustav Skarsgård. As you know, the word starboard comes from the Viking steerboard, and port is bearboard, which means the bearboard and the steerboard, because the steering rudder was on the right side, therefore starboard. When we look at Vikings, we can see that the steering on your boat is on the wrong side." Little do they know that we have to use motors and things, because trying to line longboats up in a shot takes forever when you're using the wind. So you don't even use the rudder very much to do it. But Gustav just turned around and he took a nice little dramatic pause and he went, "I'll let you into a secret. I may play a boat builder, but I didn't build the boat." And it just kind of it brought the house down. But this guy was so furious that we'd got this part wrong. But I mean, in all seriousness, that's the problem. It's the fine line between making a historical drama and an entertaining television show. Because I have a lot of respect for the history, but for instance, Rollo and Ragnar were not brothers in real life. They lived 100 years apart. But if you want to see a show where you have Rollo and Ragnar in the same show, you don't want to keep skipping 100 years into the future, because you can't. So what better? You've got two of the most famous Vikings in Viking history. What better dynamic than to make them brothers so they can both live in the same time frame and you can follow both their journeys about what they really did in history. So that you have to make allowances like that. And the other side of it is, when these people turn around, there are some things that historically are accurate, we know. There are a lot of things that are a load of bullshit that are written in history books. Because as you can understand, there's my truth, your truth, and then the real truth. And when you're writing about history 100 years, 200 years in the future, then you're not, it's still your word. It's still the best documentation you can get. For instance, with Rollo, one of the guys who wrote a lot of the stuff about the Duke of Normandy was a guy called Dudo San Quentin. And he was writing about Rollo 100 years after Rollo lived. And he was paid by the current Duke of Normandy to document this guy's lineage. So you imagine in that time, you're like, write about my family, and if you write anything bad, I'll off with your head. It's that kind of thing. So it's like we're reading all this stuff going, Rollo was this amazing warlord leader, Duke of Normandy, who put like a gold ring hanging from an apple orchard. And during his power, no one tried to steal it because they respected his rule so much. Bullshit. So I think, if you're going to turn around and go, "Well, that's a real historical record," it's not. So my job as an actor sometimes is to take all of that history, and I do all my research, but I don't necessarily hold on to it. I go, "Oh, what's that story and that story, and what would I piece together with my own imagination as what I believe to be the truth?" And I think that's the.
I've got one issue with Vikings. So pretend you're at San
Was
Diego.
it about the starboard or the port or anything,
No,
Brian? Because
no,
I feel like
no,
we've covered
no.
that. I feel...
I'm not very happy. I'm not very happy that no one is wearing glasses, right? Because I had a thought the other day, right? Back in the day of Vikings, right? Surely there were people with bad eyesight. So did they have to have an eye test before becoming a Viking?
Well, I suppose back then, if you had bad eyesight, you usually, tripped on something, fell on a rusty nail, and died of sepsis.
That would be me then.
The survival of the
That would be
fittest.
me.
Oh, yeah,
I would
you'd
stab
just been
myself
dead.
before even getting to the field.
Yeah, they wouldn't have let me in. I can't grow a beard.
Is
You know what I mean?
it a Ricky Gervais joke? Or is it Louis C.K. who makes the joke about, like, if you were just short-sighted back in dinosaur times, I suppose you'd just be like, "Oh, it's like a friendly lizard." Jump.
That would be me. Did you manage to steal anything from the set of Vikings? As a suit.
What did you rob? What did you rob, Clive?
Yeah.
What did you steal? Did you hair
I
pieces?
did. I just heard your
axes?
sponsor is the props guys. The props guys. I was actually thinking about. I was going to do a little auction with some of the stuff I did steal.
Sell it to him.
Come on.
Yeah. I did steal some stuff, but it was tough because we were there for so long. We sometimes see them. They get like all the shields together, and they'd be like, "Well, we're wrecking this set now, so we're just going to burn all these shields because there's no storage for them." You're like, "What?" You know, I felt like it wasn't stealing. It was kind of like it was very Robin Hood. It was like, you know,
Liberating.
pilfering from the
I,
village.
I enjoy that. I like that because, like, because we have a lot of American actors on this and Canadians as well who are so lovely and nice. And when we come to saying, "What did you rob? What did you steal?" they're always giving us some middle of the road answer where they go, "Well, I got given a pin badge. Tell us what's in the garage. Tell us what you've had away
Yeah.
with. We know you've robbed some things. I want to know the full story."
But if you
I
do
always
want
think
to,
what stopped us from robbing stuff is because we had to get that flight from Dublin to London. Whereas there was one member of the
Big actor.
cast, I'm going to throw him under the bus, Jefferson Hall. He always used to drive his car over on the ferry, and I'm like, what went in the boot of his car? To this day, he's the
Yeah.
garage I want to open.
Yeah.
I'm like, that guy must have a whole Viking museum.
and one
100%.
trip, he changed that car for a transit van. You know what I mean?
Yeah. 8x4, laughing.
I'm just borrowing it. Long wheelbase. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, if you
Because
are
I
interested,
remember I did steal an axe once, and I was stupid enough to go into the production office and go, "Do you have a number for a shipping company?" And they were like, "What are you shipping?" I'm like, "It's about this big, kind of tough." They're like, "Give it back, Clive."
darn it. Well, I am sure there are lots of Vikings fans out there would absolutely bite your hand off for something personally owned by you from that show. And then talking about another franchise quickly, but I'm looking at the time, that you're doing in September, you are releasing a computer game, which is, again, quite associated with Nottingham, which I think is fantastic, which is Space Marine 2. There you are there, a picture with a very large gun, which is from, was that taken at the headquarters, I think?
It was. They took me down to the Games Workshop headquarters in Nottingham, and we had a whole tour of everything, and they let me mess around with the chainsaws and the bolt guns and everything. It's a pretty special place. I remember when I was growing up, it was always like you drive by and it's always top secret. And I had friends that kind of knew somebody at work there or somebody that painted the figures, and they'd always be like, "Oh, you can't go in." So it kind of, for me, because I was such a geek when I was so young and I knew about it, it was kind of it felt like quite a privilege to be able to kind of go through the gates of Games Workshop and be like, "Oh, I've got a free pass to go in."
Do you know what?
Did you ever play? Did anybody ever play? I need to ask. Did anybody ever play?
I never played, but I loved collecting the figures and painting them. But there was a guy on the market in Melton Mowbray. He used to sell them, and he was really good. So I used to just think it was really easy. So I would go and buy those they were made of lead back then. You'd buy the lead, and I'd buy the paints, save up all this money because I didn't have a lot, and I'd be like the enamel paints, and they weren't cheap, these lead figures. And then I would think I could do it, and then I would just like turn them into mush. It was such a waste to just sit on my shelf and it just this crap painted figures. But I go to him and then I realised he'd had magnifying glasses and all sorts of stuff, and he's taken like 4 weeks to paint one figure.
Do you know what? I've got to give a shout out to
nods.
I've got to give a shout out to my friend Liam, who's a massive 40k fan, and he paints all the figures, and he's so good, and he's a massive Vikings fan. So I want to give him a shout out. But with this character, you are playing Captain Titus, which must be amazing. You did the motion capture for it as well, if I'm correct in saying.
Yeah, no, I did the whole thing for that one. It's been a great journey because they put loads of dots on my face. Then they do another motion capture session where they have the camera, a bit like people might have seen the making of Avatar, but it's the same thing. You have a helmet and the camera points at your face. So not only have you done the motion capture with the dots, they're also capturing your facial expressions. And then we did full body motion capture as well, which is kind of hilarious when you're playing a Space Marine because you take up so much space. They had to put like double American football pads on my shoulders because you have to remember, if you get into the personal space of another Space Marine, you can't get that close because the arm is so big, which was quite funny. I mean, they had a behind the scenes of us doing the motion capture in the first couple of days. People whacking into each other and kind of we weren't the most graceful Space Marines until we kind of got it under our belts. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's what makes this game special for me is that I would do the capture for it, and I would just have to do it to nothing. There would be like, there's thousands of Tyranids swarming towards you, and you've got to give the right reaction. Obviously, being a Space Marine, they don't show that much emotion. They're very in control of their emotions, so they don't want like kind of like like aliens when they're in the walls and stuff like that. But they're like, there are thousands of them, Clive, so you need to sell that. And I'm like, really? Are there thousands of them? And then when I'd come back from my next session, they'd rendered in what I did in the first session. They'd show me, and it was so incredible to see that this engine that Saber Games have got. They worked on a game called World War Z, which, you remember the Brad Pitt film? There's hundreds of thousands of zombies in that. They've got this engine that they've developed for their games, which just swarms all of these the bad guys. In this case, it's the Tyranids and things like that. But there's no lag or anything, so it really is terrifying. All this, because there's so many enemies that you can shoot in real time that are just swarming at you, and it's pretty incredible. I'm quite excited to see this game.
Well, do you know what? I'm of that age where I'm rubbish at every game because I get taken out by kids. 10, I never play any games like that. DayZ is my game on the Xbox. But before we bid farewell, when are you coming over to the UK for a convention? Because I need to add something to my shelves behind me. I need to add a signed picture or a picture.
It's funny, I don't do many conventions in the UK. I don't know what it is about us Brits, but I think it's weird. It's like I want to come home and do one. I've been doing them all over the world, and I'm like, I just want an excuse to come to London or come somewhere, and I never get invited. But it's not going to be possible soon. I'm going back to do season 4 of the morning show. It's funny you mentioned Jesse Johnson. I'm actually in Atlanta now because Lucy, my partner, she's working with him doing a film with Aaron Eckhart. So I'm being like I'm just being partner, kind of traveling around and supporting her this week. But then I'm back next week to do the morning show, season 4. And then I'm going to Ireland to do a brand new show, which I'm not sure I'm allowed to talk about. It's a 6-part drama. And I haven't signed the contract yet, so I don't think I'm allowed to talk about it. But I'm going to be super busy till December.
Yeah, I'm not going to mention what it is, but it's on IMDb Pro, so it's mentioned on there. But I won't mention it just in case. But what I've got to say is that I've been having a think, and if you get a phone call from someone that their surname might relate to a vegetable for a major role, 007. I mean, would you take on the role of James Bond? Because, in all fairness, I can imagine you as James Bond. And when you mentioned Vesper earlier on, it rung those bells again. I mean, would you like to take on the role of James Bond?
Do you want a real conversation about this?
Let's do it.
Because I think about it a lot. And I think it's time. But the thing is, I'm a big James Bond fan too, and I would want whoever to play James Bond to be the right James Bond. And I think Daniel Craig was incredible. I think whoever takes on James Bond, if it's too soon, will never live up to him. I think a lot of the people I read about that are suggested for it are way too young. It doesn't mean they're not going to be great, but they might be great in a couple of years. But I also think it's a bit of a poison chalice right now. I would love to be James Bond, but the best James Bond I could possibly be at the age of 42 is an interim James Bond. Like Timothy Dalton. I think whoever comes along to play James Bond, you have to be about 38 years old, I think, to take on the role. It takes a long time to make these films, and you want to get a good 5 films out of someone at least. So, as Daniel Craig's showing now, you get to a certain age, you can't keep up with it anymore. So it would be silly to cast a 42-year-old James Bond and expect to get five films out of them. You could get 2. So I would be up for that. But it's also a terrifying thing to take over from Daniel Craig. Some of these names, like Aaron Johnson, I think Aaron Johnson would be a brilliant James Bond. He's a little too young right now, I think. And I think maybe what they're doing, if it really is true that they're talking to Aaron Johnson, is that the PR machine is probably already working, putting him out there on GQ magazine and blah, blah, blah. So he's everywhere. So people think that they chose Aaron Johnson, even though he was chosen when he was, 36 years old. And by the time he starts filming, he'll be 38 or whatever. And you go, oh, but he's probably already got the role. Who knows? But they're my personal views on the James Bond scenario. But I do think if you were to cast him right now and a film in production next week, it wouldn't be very good, because I think Daniel Craig has made such a lasting impression. The only way you can go back is either do some kind of prequel where you make James younger again, which is probably what they're debating, or you just have an interim James Bond with a couple of stories like Timothy Dalton stepped in to do until you're ready to start the franchise over again.
The Timothy Dalton ones I really like, but I tell you what I realised is that I've got these open bets on my Sky Bet account. Do you remember when Daniel Craig wasn't going to do one? You know what I mean? He wasn't going to do the last one, was he? So they said, we're going to, it's open, and they've been sat in my betting account now for about 8 years. And in there, we've got people that were popular 8 years ago. I've got Michael Fassbender in there, who's probably a bit too old.
Yeah.
I think the only one that's
Exactly.
sticking out of that
he would have
now,
been amazing, but he's too old.
it'd have been great. It'd have been great.
Yeah.
But the only one that's sticking out now is Daniel Stevens. I feel like he might have a shout at it. I feel like give him the haircut and give him the suit. He could rock the hell out of a suit. But then again, ATJ I feel like might be a great shout, because I mean, what's the movie with Bullet? Is it Bullet Train with Brad Pitt?
He's definitely
he's outstanding in it. He's so very good.
Too young.
But who knows?
Yeah. James Bond has to be old enough. James Bond has to be old enough to think that he's already lived a life. He's been a soldier. The reason why he drinks martinis is because if he drinks beer, it reminds him of all the the post-traumatic stress and maybe the medication that he took to forget. There's a darkness to James Bond, and he has to have lived a bit. The reason why he only sleeps with married women is because there's no comeback on him, and all the original stuff from the Fleming novels. And I think if you get someone who's too young, they don't have the gravitas to play that. Otherwise it's just the Bourne films. He's just a guy, and James Bond's a bit more than just a spy. He's got a good backstory.
That is the best way I've ever heard James Bond explained to me. That is absolutely stunning, Clive. You've done your own work as well, so I assume you're ready to go.
I'm a big James Bond fan. I mean, my pitch would be, actually, if I was the producer of James Bond right now, there's so many names up for it. There's the Idris Elba, who would have been brilliant. Again, now probably slightly too old. Yeah, I put myself in the mix. You could choose 6, and what you should do is, it sounds a bit cheesy, but I think if they pulled it off, you could do 007's dead, as he is in the last film. So they're getting a new 007. Yes. So it's basically, the first film is basically all of these actors get cast. And what better publicity machine would be to not give away who actually gets the 007 title. So Idris is in it, Clive Standen's in it, Tom Hardy's in it, Aaron Taylor Johnson's in it. And they're all just agents, and they have to go through missions, and one of them will be chosen. And at the very end of the film, they go, "Welcome to the gang, 007." And you go, "Oh my God, it was Aaron Taylor Johnson," or whatever. And Idris Elba was in the film. Imagine the press. You're like, Idris is the new James Bond, and he just happens to be in the film. And they're all James Bonds, but only one is chosen to be, well, they're all 007s, but only one is chosen to be Bond. And
Well, do you know what? I'm definitely clipping that, and I'm definitely putting it out there and tagging them, because that is an excellent, excellent pitch. Let's get that made. And Clive, before you know it, you never know, you could be 004 or 006. But Clive, thank you so much for coming on to the show.
Or I'll be suing them for taking my story idea.
Yeah. Clip it, and then make sure you date it as well. For God's sake, right?
Yeah, definitely. But Clive, thank you so much for coming on to the show. It's been an absolute pleasure. Don't go anywhere. We'll say goodbye properly in a second. But thank you for everyone that's been watching. I hate doing this. It's like being a teenager. Please hit subscribe, like, and share the video. And we'll be back next week with Chelsea Harris from Snowpiercer on Wednesday at 8 o'clock. But Clive, look after yourself and keep safe, my friend.
Thanks, guys. It's been a pleasure.